You opened this tab to do something important. You know exactly what it was, and somewhere between opening your laptop and right now, it just disappeared. Not because you forgot, but because something pulled you sideways. A notification, a random thought, a reflex so fast you didn't even register it happening. And now you're here. You've probably had this moment 100 times this week alone. The task is right there. The intention was completely real, and yet something keeps intercepting the signal between wanting to do it and actually doing it. Like there's a gap between who you mean to be and what your brain actually does when left alone for 30 seconds. That gap has a name, and it has a reason, and neither one is what you've been told. Here's what nobody talks about. The inability to focus is not a discipline problem. It never was. It's a signal. And understanding what that signal is actually saying about your nervous system will change the way you see yourself more than any productivity tip ever could. Society has a very comfortable story for this. You're distracted. You're addicted to your phone. You have no willpower. You just need to wake up earlier, want it more, put the phone in another room, do a dopamine detox for a weekend, and come back a new person. And if none of that works, if you try all of it and still find yourself staring at a wall 15 minutes into something that matters, then clearly the problem is you. But that story is wrong, and the people confidently telling it have never actually looked at what's happening inside the nervous system of someone who genuinely cannot hold attention anymore. Because if they had, they would stop talking about discipline entirely. They'd be asking a completely different set of questions. What's actually happening is this. Your brain has a system called the default mode network. It's the network that activates when you're not actively engaged in a task. Daydreaming, mind-wandering, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, imagining a version of tomorrow that hasn't happened yet. Neuroscientists used to think of this system as background noise, filler. They were wrong. The default mode network is, in a very real sense, the seat of your inner life. And over the last decade of research, one finding has surfaced again and again. In people who struggle to stay focused, this network doesn't quiet down when it's supposed to. It keeps running, while you're trying to read, while you're trying to write, while you're sitting in a meeting pretending to care about a slide deck. The default mode network is still firing underneath everything, still pulling your attention inward, still insisting, quietly but persistently, that there is something more urgent happening inside your own head than whatever is in front of you right now. That's not a malfunction. That's your nervous system doing precisely what it was shaped to do. And here's where it gets personal. A brain that learned early in life that the outside world was unpredictable, emotionally inconsistent, or simply too loud to process comfortably, will build stronger pathways toward internal experience, toward thought, toward imagination, toward the interior world where things can be controlled, replayed, and made sense of. This isn't a conscious decision a child makes, it's adaptation. The nervous system studies its environment across years of repeated experience and makes structural choices about where safety lives. For a lot of people, safety lived inside, and the brain never fully forgot that. Then something changed in the external world. Screens arrived, and then infinite scroll, and then algorithmically optimized content designed by teams of engineers whose entire job was to figure out the exact moment your attention starts to drift and catch it. Notifications calibrated to hit when you're already distracted. Sounds, colors, and movement patterns engineered to feel urgent even when nothing urgent is happening. What those systems did, very efficiently, was retrain the dopamine architecture of the prefrontal cortex to expect stimulation on demand, not reward after sustained effort. Stimulation immediately, without discomfort, without waiting, without the friction that deep focus actually requires. A 2019 study out of the University of California, Irvine, found that after a single interruption, one notification, one tab switch, one moment of distraction, it takes the average human brain 23 minutes to return to its original level of focused attention. 23 minutes
for one interruption. Most people operating in a modern work environment experience dozens of interruptions every single hour. Do that math slowly, and then ask yourself honestly, when in any stretch of a given day was sustained focus ever actually possible? Not theoretically, actually, given the conditions you were working inside. This is an environmental problem being sold to you as a personal failure. And it's worth saying clearly, different nervous systems respond to this environment differently. Some people have neurological profiles that are more resistant to the pull of distraction. Their attention systems have a tighter grip. Others have systems that are more sensitive to novelty, more reactive to unexpected stimulation, more easily pulled off course by a single input that doesn't belong. Neither is superior, neither is broken. They are adapted for different conditions. One type of mind thrives in structured, predictable environments. The other thrives in chaos, urgency, and rapid pattern recognition. The problem isn't the mind. The problem is when the wrong environment gets to write the story about what the mind is worth. But here's where it gets genuinely counterintuitive. And this is the part that most conversations about focus completely skip over. The same neurological trait that makes sustained attention so difficult is very often the trait that makes certain kinds of thinking remarkable. A mind that can't stay locked on one narrow track tends to be a mind that makes connections across wide distances, that catches patterns others filter out entirely, that holds multiple threads simultaneously in a way that more linearly wired thinkers simply cannot access. The research on divergent thinking, creative problem-solving, and associative cognition keep pointing toward the same uncomfortable truth. The hyper-connected, stimulus-sensitive brain is often doing something structurally sophisticated, not something structurally deficient. The cost is real, and it deserves honesty. The inability to sustain attention has genuine consequences on the quality of work, on relationships, on the slow and quiet moments that give a life its texture. That cost is worth naming without softening it. But you are not broken. You are a specific kind of mind operating inside an environment that was engineered for engagement, not for depth. That is a very different diagnosis, and it opens a very different door.
If there's one practical shift that the research consistently supports, it is this. Stop trying to force focus through willpower and start engineering the conditions that make focus possible without a fight. Your brain does not change through effort alone when it comes to attention. It changes through environment. Reduce friction before the session starts. One tab open, one task visible, a physical workspace cleared of competing visual inputs. Consistent cues that signal to your nervous system, this moment is different from the scroll. This mode has different rules. And begin with a duration that feels almost insultingly small. 5 minutes of deliberate, single-task presence. Not because 5 minutes is the goal, but because 5 minutes done consistently, without breaking, begins to lay down new dopamine pathways in a way that 2 hours of frustrated, fragmented trying never will. The brain learns through repetition and through completion, not through intensity and suffering. Every time you finish a small window of focus intact, you give your nervous system evidence that this is survivable, that presence doesn't have to hurt, that the pull inward doesn't have to win every single time. That evidence builds, slowly and then noticeably. The relationship between your mind and attention is not fixed. It was shaped by experience, and it can be reshaped by new ones. That process isn't dramatic. It doesn't look like transformation. It looks like 5 minutes, then 6, then 10. Then one morning you realize you've been inside something for an hour and you didn't feel it pass. If any part of this landed somewhere real for you, somewhere that felt less like information and more like recognition, there's another layer worth exploring, about why certain kinds of minds are built for depth but struggle on the surface, about what the texture of your inner experience is actually telling you about what you need and what kind of life you're actually meant to be living.
That conversation goes further than focus, and it might explain more than you were expecting.